So let's move on. I usually cut my videos around 6 or 7 minutes. I may have extended this one a little bit because the data shows that if you contain things within the 6 to 7 minutes, you are doing a good job of chunking, and you are not overloading the students. So I want to keep chunking in consideration. So moving on, Socio seems to talk about philosophical thinking and what it includes. And philosophically and academically, philosophical thinking obviously is going to include careful assessment of terms. So for example, there are certain terms out there like minute versus minute that are spelled exactly the same but have two different meanings when we use them in the English language. So philosophers are very careful to use terms that are not ambiguous, or they should be, right, if they're doing it optimally. And you don't want the readers to have ambiguity in the message that you are trying to portray or articulate. A good philosopher tries to be clear, or a good student of philosophy tries to be clear in their communication. So another thing that philosophical thinking includes, according to Socio, is that there is an evaluation of logical reasoning. So that's in your own arguments, and then that's also in objectors' arguments and other people's arguments. So there's a difference between an objection and then an opposing argument. We'll get more into this later. So then there is also, a willingness to make refined distinctions. And this is something that is almost non-existent in today's society, especially with our political polarization. Someone posits an argument. Perhaps someone posits their own different argument. This person, we'll call this person Jane. Jane objects to Sam's argument, and in this objection, Jane actually gives some very, well-founded reasons that are evident. They seem to look at all the data, that there's hard evidence on these objections that Sam really needs to consider. But instead of looking at the data and making refined distinctions about what he's already stated, instead of doing that, or instead of reformulating, or instead of taking the data, uprooting, and moving your position elsewhere, Sam doubles down. Sam instead egoically pushes forward with the pre-existing argument despite any evidence that comes in its way. This is so common today. I am flabbergasted when someone does the opposite of this, and I'm honestly a little relieved. I'm like pleasantly surprised, and it's a really good feeling when I see someone do this. I'm like, wow, that's awesome. And it shouldn't be that way. I mean, it seems like everybody should be willing to look at the data and make refined distinctions. If someone objects to this, then on compelling grounds, then we should adapt. We should refine. So another thing philosophical thinking includes is reasons or arguments used to support an idea or position, unquote. And then all this is from Socio page 3 in your book, Archetypes of Wisdom. So what's happening here is that if I say torturing puppies is a good thing, or torturing puppies is a bad thing, I need to be able to have justification behind my position. My position cannot just be dogmatic. It cannot be, it's this because I say it is. It cannot be, God says, and that's it. You need to have reasons or arguments used to support an idea or position, and those reasons or arguments need to be good. They need to be compelling. And so this is extremely important when it comes to philosophical thinking. Another point and component of philosophical thinking that Socio points out is sort of a historical component, but it's also a part of even today, and has been sort of a common thread throughout philosophy historically, even outside of Western philosophy, maybe even more so, that there has always been a sense of philosophical wonder that is a part of this. And Socio sort of quotes Plato and Aristotle on this, suggesting that Plato and Aristotle called these sort of big questions, these appeals to sort of higher reality or these meaningful questions that wrestle with what we're doing here. Why am I alive? Why am I existing? Is there a God? What is the relationship between the mind and the body? Which psychology ended up developing out of philosophy, and a lot of people still don't understand that. So Plato and Aristotle called this the philosophical sense of wonder. This is also on page 3 of Socio. And this philosophical sense of wonder is absolutely a part of philosophical thinking. And, the way Socio talks about it, and Aristotle and Plato, that each culture and each generation sort of asks these questions anew. As science develops, as more information becomes known and part of the public epistemology, or consensus, new questions are awakened that may be the same but asked in a little bit different way, and this is part of being a student of philosophy, and this is part of being a philosopher. Now, I also want to make a distinction that I think is sort of in this first chapter implicitly. There's this idea of opinions as we sort of know them commonly in our understanding of them. I think we tend to think opinions as sort of this subjective phenomenon that can't be verified. And we also do, here's what I think is a good example of an opinion. Orange is the best color. Now, in a potential objection to that being an opinion, one might be able to say, well, what if orange actually is the best color? And so they're like, let's do some sort of sociological or psychological study where we look at the whole world, and then whatever the world decides, say that they look at the surveys after all the data comes in, and there's a overwhelming consensus that orange is the best color. Now, that might be true in the sense that people agreed at this point in time in history, but if you actually look if you were able to do that throughout history, I guarantee you it would probably be different every time. I don't think that there is any way to measure that, so I definitely do think that is a true opinion. But I think there are also other things out there, like that people think are opinions, like, I don't know, the world is flat. But there is actual factual data that goes against that position, right? So I guess the point of this is there is a difference, I think, how we conceptually understand opinions and facts. And I think, one, that breaks down under philosophical scrutiny the opinion versus fact sort of understanding of things. And two, I think sociologically here in America, how we think, how common people sort of think opinion should be understood, often gets conflated with a position. And I think they can totally be the same thing if you sort of clearly define what those are. For example, philosopher David Hume talks about opinion and position, sort of belief, all these things sort of being the same thing. But he's also a strict empiricist. We're not going to get into all that. But the point is, this will be a relevant discussion that I think is important for introductory philosophy students to understand, especially in your papers. I don't want you to say it is okay to torture puppies or it is not okay to torture puppies and leave it at that. So we'll get more into this into our next video. Thank you.